discussion with a request to those who pose the questions, please to come to the mics, because our interpreters have very large problems with hearing what is said. So please, those who would like to pose a question, please come to the mic.
We can meet in a second.
And yes.
Oh, no, sorry. It doesn't work. Only this one.
So, if those who would like to ask a question would like to come forward and speak to one of these people.
Oh, yeah.
So, the two first speakers posed very important questions, I think, and the public asked already about some issues which we might consider for discussion at this panel. And I think a very important, one of the important issues is the political involvement in theology, which is important feature in the dialogue, the ecumenical dialogue, not only for the German churches, but of course also for the churches of other denominations and for other religions as well. The question of politics and theology and church and state relations maybe one of you or involved would like to reflect on that. Another topic which I would like us to consider today is the problem of the definition of tradition, the definition of fundamentalism. I think the questions which the two questions we heard to you were about definition, and the question which I didn't pose was like telling you or teasing you, because I saw you said that fundamentalists are led by mail, and I was wondering whether we could make a broader definition, because I can very well imagine feminist fundamentalists, and I think it's about definition and normativity in both cases, in the case of ecumenical dialogue as well as in the case of fundamentalism and dialogue, if it is possible with fundamentalists. Again, the question of definition. But so maybe you would like to
Yes, thank you for this profound introduction. I think we have fundamentalism not outside the churches as opponents against the ecumenical movement. We have within our churches the same range of opinions like we have in a mirror outside. And I think this is not only due to the outer condition of fundamentalism, which my colleague very well pointed out, but it is also due to some questions within the churches which the churches didn't solve yet. And I think these are the three important questions. First question is the Protestant question: what does the Holy Bible really say? Aren't we always taking an interpretation of Holy Scripture, finding out something? The second question would be an Orthodox question: what is tradition really? What really is tradition? And tradition is always a selection and reinterpretation of tradition. And the third is the question: what is the meaning of the Christian liturgy? And we have to give a profound, non-fundamentalistic answer within our churches. And I'm convinced that one church without the other can't solve this problem. The Protestant can't solve the problem what the Holy Scripture we are to be obedient against really says alone, without tradition, without liturgy, and our other sister churches, we all have to work what the Holy Scripture said really, what the tradition means really, and why is the liturgy or the prayer so important.
Oh, I think I agree exactly with what you're saying. What concerns me, operating out of the Catholic tradition, for a minute, taking that perspective, I'm concerned about what I see as kind of a, shall we call it, a tendency toward fundamentalism. And I keep saying we just have to be willing to ask the questions. I suppose that's part of education as well. But that willingness to ask the questions can be very upsetting. For years, I worked with a group of 13 Catholic bishops from the United States. And in a year, I'm going to start doing the same thing with a group of Belgian bishops. Well, within 2 years, when we get a new archbishop. But just to give you one example, half a year ago, I was in the United States for a meeting with the U.S. Catholic bishops. And late at night, after spending the day with one bishop, actually an older archbishop, in meetings all day with him, then we had dinner, had a couple drinks, we were feeling very relaxed. And I turned to him and I said, Archbishop, when is the last time you really experienced the presence of God in your life? And he said. So I said, no, I said, this is not for writing an article or anything, it's just friendly conversation, you and me. He looked at me and little tears started coming down his cheek. He said, when I was 15 years old. And I said, what have you been doing ever since? And I wasn't being sarcastic. I wasn't being unkind. He said, I have been an automatic pilot my whole life, saying the things and doing the things that a bishop is supposed to say and do. And I said, well, it might be good then, if I may say so, to ask yourself today, where is God? And I said, because Archbishop, that's the question a lot of people in your congregation are asking today. Yeah. Could I talk about the political thing a bit? Or is that okay?
Yes,
is that okay? I don't think it's the job of a religion to run civil society. I think it is the job of a religion to be a critical voice in civil society. And it doesn't bother me when religious leaders stand up and take positions on various issues. I think that's their responsibility. It does bother me, though, when a particular religious group or religious leader begins to manipulate the political agenda for his own, I guess it could be hers too, but his or their own, what I would call, narrow political vision. I think be the critical voice, but not try to run the political scene. And sometimes it's a fine point of distinction, but the particular problem I see is easy for me to talk about because I don't live there right now. I go back and forth a lot, but when I look at the United States and the Catholic Church in the United States, I see a group of bishops who are very, very much moving along the lines of a kind of fundamentalist perspective. And they would love to control politics, and they try to manipulate politicians by refusing to give them communion if they don't subscribe to their political agenda. Well, I think that's right, yeah.
On this topic of politics and theology in the ecumenical dialogue, and then I would like to focus on the much discussed topic of insider-outsider perspective. We are talking on academia. Was the dialogue between the churches you were researching, was it a dialogue between outsiders, or sometimes the insiders was also possible?
It's very difficult to have this clear. I think that the main points and the main reasons for the dialogues have been theological and spiritual ones, because especially in the dialogue between Germany and Russia, this dialogue tried to speak out things which politicians can't speak out, to confess the wounds of the past, to ask for forgiveness, to talk about love, and not to be a slave of political situation. The church has the chance to be not a slave of the political situation, but of course the sin of the church, or the danger of the church, always is the danger to be a slave of the political situation.
It's not always like being merged or merged with politics, theology, that doesn't have to do that. And maybe we can ask the public to pose some questions which we would collect and then answer them. I open the discussion. Come to the mics. Пожалуйста, выходите к микрофону. Еще раз хочу сказать, переводчикам очень трудно слушать, поэтому если вы хотите задать вопрос, пожалуйста, выходите к микрофону. Any questions?
Because I'm interested in with interreligious dialogue. We have now half a century of tradition going on, and I'm so interested in how did our tradition evolve. And to you, I wanted to ask, you have been working with fundamentalism for 40 years, you said. Did fundamentalism change? Did your dialogue with fundamentalism change in those 40 years? I know it's not so much about politics, but it did something.
Are there other questions? Because I would like, if there are questions, I would like to collect them, and otherwise we just answer them. No, not yes.
My question is about more about fundamentalists.
how fundamentalists see, understand future in general, and their own future, and the future of the modern world in particular.
This again goes mostly to Dr. Nick, but as someone who has had excellent contacts over the years with evangelical Christians in the Western sense of the word, not simply mainstream Protestant, but evangelical Christians, I want to ask if your use of the word fundamentalist, which in fact began in the 1920s amongst evangelical Christians, do you mean fundamentalist as being, by definition, evangelical Christians? Or, thank you, good to hear you.
No, I think some. Is that it?
Sorry.
Okay, fine.
I have a question about such a term like political theology. There is an opinion that all the political terms are theological by their essence. How does traditional theology, traditional religion, evangelical church, theological deal with politics? It has the same basis, the same nature, and so on.
There is no one. Maybe we can start with the last question.
Yes, I think this is a branch. Something of the gospel is social gospel, some aspects of the gospel is political gospel, and the gospel can't be lived without consequences for society. Yes. The patterns to answer this, how the faith in the society is dealing with each other, is, I think, nearly the churches are very close. They say we have the Catholic Church says we have a social gospel, we have a certain teaching about society, moral teaching about society. The Orthodox churches are this symphonic view of Christian and political vision, and the Lutherans have the two kingdoms of God. It's very similar. I think all churches think and agree that Christian faith has consequences for political life, but all churches agree that the political life is only a consequence and not the starting point.
And then there were a few questions to you. Two of them were related somehow to the time problem. One was whether the dialogue has changed your dialogue with the fundamentalists, and the other one was a related question, but from a more like a metaphysical point of view, whether the view of the future of the fundamentalists, what can you say about the future? And the last one was about
I'll start with Tade's question first. Okay. No, I would certainly not say evangelicals are per se fundamentalists. No. You can have fundamentalist evangelicals, but I see fundamentalism in shades of fundamentalism in all traditions. But I would never say that a particular tradition per se is fundamentalist. One of my big, if you want to get me agitated, one of my big points of agitation is when people talk about Islam and say all Muslims are fundamentalists. That's just not true. I think, first of all, many fundamentalists view the present as dangerous, the present as a time of chaos, and they would like to move toward a future that will be chaos-free. Now, how do you achieve that? Oh, I think most fundamentalists, regardless of faith tradition, I think most fundamentalists would say the ideal future will come from a kind of what I would call fundamentalist theocracy, in which the fundamentalist leaders take charge of every dimension of life and move society toward this kind of utopian dream. Okay. But I think deep down, I think fundamentalists really are, if not actually in their wishes, I think they're theocratic. They would like to have the religious leaders be the civil leaders as well. Okay. Yeah. Can I say a couple things about the education? Is that?
Because we don't have much time anymore, maybe you can reflect on your question about the change, whether the dialogue has changed with fundamental.
Okay. Well, when I said that I worked with fundamentalists for actually more than 40 years. What I meant really is that, in my experience as an old professor, I worked with all kinds of people, very good people, open-minded people, etc., in all traditions. But I seem to aggravate the fundamentalist types when I talk. Okay. So I worked with fundamentalist Catholics, fundamentalist Muslims. Oh, basically, I think the times changed a bit, but the basic fundamentalist perspective doesn't change that much. Okay. But I'm more interested in how we move beyond the fundamentalist perspective. And after spending that afternoon, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, with those imams in Brussels, they were very kind. They were very fine people. But we reached the point where I said something that got some of them rather upset. I said, as a Christian, it came down to interpreting the Quran. And I told them, first of all, that I have a couple of copies of the Quran, kind of like critical editions. And I said in a very friendly way, I think what the Islamic world needs is an historical, critical understanding of the Quran. And a couple of older imams were very offended by that. I said, I don't want to offend you. But I said, I think we really do have to understand how sacred texts come down to us. Okay? When the conference was over, 3 young imams came up to me and said, you're absolutely right. He said, we need to have an historical, critical approach to the Quran. And it will come. It will come. Yeah. No, that's the education thing again. Huh? I think we really need to, my goodness, I think we really need to do a better job of educating our young people. I'm just amazed at what I would call the religious ignorance among young people that I work with. And that doesn't mean brainwashing them or anything. It just means various projects on here during Advent, or maybe during Lent. Okay.
Thank you very much. I would like to close this discussion with a question to all of us, because what I'm hearing is like, is it all the question of hermeneutics? Is it all the question of our interpretation of what truth is? And also, it reflects, it involves politics in theology, and it involves our own education. What is the right hermeneutics? And I think we all are stuck with like prolegomena. We don't move really further in our dialogue, because there is probably we are stuck with this approach problem, with the problem of right method and right interpretation. And I think to conjoin it means to start the right view of the Bible, the right view of the tradition, and the right view of our liturgy. We have to seek for something else and how do we do that? Maybe we can learn from Brother Matthew, whom I'd like to call with the paper which is entitled Pilgrims of Trust, the Adventure of Laity and Young People. So we all are on the way. Maybe we can learn how we can produce right hermeneutics on the way. Please.
Thank you.